when I was writing about Jefferson and Hemings and the way historians wrote the story, the way Jefferson biographers treated the words of enslaved people who talked about life at Monticello. As long as they were saying things that were positive, they would quote that. But if they said things that were negative, they'd say, well, you don't have to pay any attention to that. And I thought, you know, we mainly pay attention, we save our greatest sympathy for people who are victims of crime, victims of other things. You know, we pay attention to them. But it struck me as strange that when you're talking about slavery, when the people who had been enslaved came out of it and said, this is what happened to me, you said, oh, we don't have to listen to that. And it's like, why do you care? What stake do you have in, you know, identifying with the people who are the oppressors? And obviously, there's a racial component to it, for the same reason people don't want, you know, sort of difficult history taught in schools. I mean, I mentioned Ruby Bridges, and apparently there's a controversy about a children's book about Ruby Bridges that people don't want in schools because there's a picture of white people yelling at Ruby Bridges as she goes into the school, except there were white people who were yelling at Ruby Bridges when she went into the school. It actually happened. And so people said, well, this will make white children feel bad. And it's like, why? Why do you think that? I mean, why? There is in the book also a white teacher who helps Ruby Bridges. So why wouldn't the kids, if it's about race, why do you think the kids would not identify with Ruby? Of course they would. Do you not want them to identify with Ruby? Or the white teacher? Why would it, what stake do you have in protecting the reputations of those people who were yelling at Ruby Bridges when she went, you know, into the school? And there's this sense that it is all about race, that they will think about it. And I don't think that kids, I would bet you any 5 or 6 or 7-year-old reading that book would immediately identify with Ruby and say, that's not a great thing. And I wouldn't do that. You know, they wouldn't say, I identify with those people who are yelling. It doesn't have to be racial.
Right.
People say you identify with people who, in some ways, whose spirit, whose character you feel connected to. It doesn't have to be racial, but I think it's really telling that the historians would immediately go to protect the reputations of white slave owners, but not the enslaved, because they see everything, this connection in race.